What if one of the ways to fight racism is to stop being afraid of racist words? Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? How could repeating something offensive possibly make racism weaker? Well, that's the question I want to explore today. Because there is a difference between hatred and humor. There's a difference between deliberately hurting somebody and friends making jokes about one another because they know there is no hatred behind them. But does that actually take power away from racist language? Or are we just fooling ourselves into thinking that it does? Let's talk about it. Hello, everybody. Psycho back. I'm your bad influencer. I'm telling you things you don't want to know and showing you things you don't want to see. And today I'm telling you about something that is probably going to make some people very uncomfortable: racist jokes, and then mainly among friends. Now, before anybody misunderstands me, I'm not talking about genuinely hating people because of their ethnicity. I'm not talking about discrimination. I'm not talking about somebody deliberately humiliating another person because of their race. I'm talking about something much more complicated: friends, people who know each other, people who trust each other, people who know that when one person makes a joke about another person's background, the joke isn't actually coming from hatred. I grew up in a very multicultural environment. I grew up in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. And when you're surrounded by people from different backgrounds, sometimes ethnicity becomes part of the humor between friends. People joke about each other's cultures, they joke about accents, they joke about stereotypes, and sometimes they deliberately use words that outside the friendship would be deeply offensive. And here's the interesting part: the people making those jokes aren't necessarily becoming more racist. Sometimes the exact opposite is happening. They're taking something that was intended to divide people and turning it into something that everyone can laugh about together. And I think there is a psychological idea behind this that is worth considering. Words have power because we give them power. A word can be used to humiliate somebody, it can be used to threaten somebody, it can be used to make somebody feel inferior. But what happens when the people who are supposedly being targeted stop being afraid of the word? What happens when somebody says something offensive and the response is not fear, anger, or shame? What happens when the response is, really? That's the best you've got? Or even, come on, mate, you can do better than that. Suddenly, the person trying to use the word as a weapon doesn't have quite the same weapon anymore. And I think that's an important distinction. Taking power away from a word doesn't mean pretending the history behind it doesn't exist. Absolutely not. Some words have been used for generations to demean real people. Some have been connected to violence, discrimination, and oppression. We should never erase that history. But acknowledging the history does not mean that every person who uses a taboo word in every context has the same intention. Context matters, relationship matters, intent matters, and perhaps most importantly, how the person on the receiving end experiences it matters. If two close friends constantly joke about each other's backgrounds and both genuinely enjoy it, that is fundamentally different from a stranger using the same language to intimidate somebody. The words may be identical, the meaning is not. And this is where I think modern discussions about offensive language sometimes become complicated. We can become so focused on the word itself that we forget to examine the person using it, the relationship between the people involved, and what the person is actually trying to accomplish. A racist can use a racist joke to spread hatred. Two friends can use a similar joke to make each other laugh. Those aren't morally identical situations. But, and this is important, I also don't think we should pretend that humor is automatically harmless. A joke can still hurt somebody. Somebody might laugh along with the others because they don't want to be the difficult person in the room. A joke that works beautifully between two close friends might be completely inappropriate with somebody you barely know. And sometimes people use it was just a joke as an excuse of saying something genuinely hateful. So I'm not arguing say whatever you want and nobody is allowed to complain. That's too simplistic. I'm arguing something slightly different. Maybe we should not automatically assume that removing offensive words from everyday conversation will remove racism, because racism isn't created by vocabulary. A person does not become racist because they learn a particular word, and a racist does not stop being racist because society stops using that word. Hatred comes from ideas, beliefs, behavior, and attitudes. And that brings me back to the original question. Can friends taking the fear out of the taboo language actually weaken the power of people who want to use that language to divide us? I think sometimes it can, because division requires us to see each other as fundamentally different. But if your best friend can insult your background, you can insult his. Everybody laughs, and 5 minutes later, you're sitting there eating together. Maybe the joke has done something rather interesting. It has taken something that could have been used to separate you and turned it into something that exists inside the friendship instead of, of between you. That's powerful. But I think we have to be careful. Don't confuse familiarity with permission. Do not assume that because your friends are comfortable with something, everyone is. And don't use this philosophy as an excuse to target somebody who has clearly told you that something hurts them. Because then you're no longer taking power away from prejudice. You're simply using humor as a weapon. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who know each other well enough to understand the difference between laughing at each other and hating each other. And perhaps that's the real reason. Maybe the strongest antidote to prejudice isn't making everybody terrified of saying the wrong thing. Maybe it's creating relationships where people become so comfortable with one another's differences that those differences stop being threatening. You can be black, you can be white, you can be Asian, you can be Arab, you can be Latino, you can be gay, you can be straight, you can come from a completely different culture from the person sitting next to you. And you can still be friends. You can still laugh. You can still argue. You can still make fun of one another. And when the joke is finished, you're still friends. Because underneath the joke is something more important: mutual respect. Now, because most of my best friends are Turkish, I'm going to tell you a Turkish racist joke. So, there was a German, a Dutch guy, and a Belgian guy in a cannibal restaurant. And the German, he orders a Jew to eat. And the waiter said, "Sure, sir, but it will cost you $5,000." And the German said, "Oh, $5,000 for a Jew? Why? It's Jew, you know." So the waiter said, "Yes, sir, I understand, but in World War II, you guys killed so many of them, so they're scarce, hard to find." So the German goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, you're right. What can I do?" So the Belgian guy, he orders a black guy to eat. So the waiter says, "Sure, sir, no problem." He says, "But it's $10,000." So the Belgian says, $10,000 for a black guy? There's blacks everywhere. Why $10,000? So the waiter says, "Sir, because they run so fast, they're so hard to catch." "Yeah, yeah, you're right. Sure, okay." So the Dutch guy, he says, "I would like a Turk to eat." So the waiter says, "Sure, not a problem. $15,000." So the Dutch guy says, 15,000 Turks everywhere. They don't run very fast, so you can catch them. What's the problem? Why so much? He said, "Sir, do you have any idea how long it takes to clean a Turk?" So there you go. No, but again, I sincerely believe that by making jokes about these things and not being offended by every little thing, I think we take away the power of that word. I think if we can all joke with each other in a nice way, I think racism will not disappear, but it will lose power. Now, Here's my final thought. I don't think we can defeat racism simply by banning words. And I don't think we defeat racism simply by making everybody afraid to say the wrong thing. I think we defeat racism by refusing to let differences become barriers between human beings. Sometimes that means serious conversations. Sometimes it means standing up against genuine discrimination. And sometimes among people who genuinely trust each other, it might even mean laughing at the absurdity of the stereotypes that were once supposed to divide us. But know your audience, know your friends, know the difference between humor and hatred. Because if the person you're joking with is laughing with you, that's one thing. If they're laughing because they're afraid to object, that's something completely different. And perhaps that's the real test. Not did you use an offensive word, but what were you trying to do with that? Were you trying to hurt somebody? Were you trying to make yourself feel superior? Or were you two friends taking something that was supposed to divide you and turning it into another reason to laugh together? I'll leave that one with you. And before I go, I'd like to say something. I grew up in the Netherlands, like I said, in Rotterdam. And in the Netherlands, we have these comedians. We have one is of black and Hindi descent, Surinamese, and he always makes these jokes about the Surinamese. So it's like making fun of himself and his background. Um, and his name is Jurgen Rijman. And there is a Moroccan comedian, and he makes fun of himself and his background of the Moroccans. And because so many people love those guys, the Moroccan guy, by the way, is it Najib Amhali. So because everybody loves them, they're great guys. Like I said, it takes away if everybody makes a joke about these things, it kind of fraternizes people instead of dividing them. Anyway, um, as always, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your patience. Remember to hold your convictions firmly enough to explain them, but lightly enough to change them. Don't blindly trust me. Don't blindly trust anybody. Do your own research. Ask difficult questions. Challenge assumptions, even your own. Think for yourself. And if you discover something that proves me wrong, let me know. Then we will both have learned something. Now, if you would like to help support the channel and keep these conversations going, you can do that financially if you're able and if you're willing. But if you don't want to or just cannot contribute financially, that's absolutely fine. Please subscribe, like my videos, comment on my videos, and share them with somebody who may enjoy them as well. Those things really help the channel, and it keeps me excited to keep doing this. I'm always looking forward to see comments, and honestly, I'm not getting enough of them. And I every time I do get one, I'm so very excited to see what it says and react to it. So please do comment on the videos. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Until the next time, may peace be upon you all.